Hi everyone, this is the second session of the 11th edition of SIGEF. You had already the pleasure to listen to us in the opening remarks and the greetings words of Wade joining us in USA, from USA today. Thank you, Wade, for making the time. It's quite late for you. So Wade, basically, you have acquired, across, more than 13 years, huge experience into mineral resources development in different parts of the world and mostly in Africa. That has given you, a significant perception on the potentials, on the realities, on the challenges that developing mineral resources that can benefit citizens and the populations on the ground. So first of all, Wade, we would like to know maybe what was the starting point. What is the inspiration that brought you to fall in love with Africa continent and its people, and want to create a positive impact for the population on the ground through the different entrepreneurial projects that you are conducting?
Yes, thank you, Jonathan, and thank you, SIGEF and or you for letting us participate once again in this very important online forum. So for Africa, it's it's something that when I was young, growing up, you saw Africa on National Geographics, and you always knew it was a very interesting and amazing place. But the last thing crossing your mind was that I would spend over 32 years there developing natural resource projects and falling in love with the continent, where I couldn't say that I will work there till I'll stop working, and I won't stop working until till I'm in the grave. So it's such a unique and diverse continent to be working in. I'm very honored to have the opportunity. It was I ended up in Africa really kind of by chance, where I was raised in Alberta, Canada, which is oil and gas mainly driven industries. My father was in the oil industry, and I went to university to study geology in the US, in the Grand Canyon. And it was when I went back out of university back to Canada, I was working there for about a year and a half, 2 years. One of my college roommates and very close friends during university, named Vince Hamilton. Unfortunately, Vince passed away about 4 years ago, but I would like to make reference to his name. So Vince was a very dear friend of mine, and Vince went to work for one of the Lundin groups, who, in Geneva, I'm sure many people know the name. They're very large natural resource development company. Vince went to work for one of the Lundin groups and was working kind of offshore Benin Republic for Lundin's. And one of my father's friends had an asset in Benin Republic, and he was selling his company, and nobody wanted that asset. And he said, "Do you know anybody interested?" And I said, I'll phone my friend. He's working there. And he said, "Look, there's not a lot of oil in Benin Republic, but next door in that big crazy place called Nigeria, there's more oil than people know what to do with. It's dominated by the majors, but so there might be some potential." Next thing I know, I'm on an airplane to London. I meet these lawyers. We go to Benin Republic, and the lawyers are saying, "Why are you in Benin Republic? You need to be in Nigeria." And I said, "I've read scary things about Nigeria." They said, "No, Nigeria is a fabulous country with significant opportunity." And the government at that point in time had initiated an indigenization program, where in an effort to create an independent Nigerian-owned oil and gas industry, they allocated 15 blocks, deep water mainly blocks, to strong families who had succeeded in other business ventures in Nigeria. They allocated these oil blocks to them. So it was just the right time, the right place. Then I got introduced to these Nigerians back in London, then we all flew back to Nigeria. And it was just, meeting the right partners at the right time, where they were allocated oil and gas blocks. They did not have any experience whatsoever in financing or developing oil and gas assets. There was a huge trained pool of Nigerians that had been working for the major oil companies, Shell, Mobil, Chevron. So no lack of talent, but it was just integrating the talent of individuals working for major IOCs and an independent where, you know, it was a perfect fit for someone like myself and my associates coming from Alberta, Canada, where that's really what drives the industry is independence and having what I call fit for purpose equipment and operating philosophies where we can do things on an independent, small company, low cost, high margin strategy. So I was very fortunate to meet extremely good local Nigerian partners. They had good assets, and we managed to then basically list these assets in Canada on the stock exchange. We raised a substantial amount of money, took these assets into production, and started producing them. And you know, that was 32 years ago. So for me, it wasn't just the oil and gas industry, which I kind of was raised in and brought up in, and saw, you know, my family and friends, you know, have interesting careers in. But it was the fact that I could see change. I could feel that not only was I doing what I kind of went to school to become a geologist, and what I'd seen and lived with growing up in an oil and gas industry family. It was the impact and the positive impact that we could see we were making by going into communities where there was really just farming, you know, extremely harsh conditions. And we would go in, and the first things we would do is drill water wells. And then we would provide, you know, fresh, clean water for the first time to a lot of the communities and villages. And then we would start by bringing in more equipment, more people would come, and then we'd create more employment. And it was this that really made me fall in love with the continent, and fall in love with the strategy of development in a country, but not letting us be the main developers or main drivers. It was more transfer of technology, training and educating locals, developing significant infrastructure for the locals, but then also letting the locals get actively involved, you know, in the day-to-day operations, development, production of these assets. And we started off by, you know, hiring and even creating local indigenous service companies, working proactively with communities and governments. Government put in very good fiscal regimes to encourage the local independent indigenous investment to come in, and foreign companies like us to partner with them. So that's really what made me really have a different vision and outlook on Africa. And then I now have worked in probably about 15 different countries: North Africa, West Africa, Central Africa, and I'll continue to work there. We do major natural resource projects, oil and gas. I started out in Nigeria, as I mentioned, and I'm still in Nigeria. We've actually recently started a new company called Declar Resources, where we are going in and developing assets that were developed and proven by the majors, but they never really put them into full field development. So there's so much of this natural resource that's kind of proven, undeveloped, it's laying dormant. And we go in and create development opportunities. We create employment. We put in infrastructure, and you know, we're doing it based off of existing, already known, low risk natural resources, and that's what we find all over Africa. If it's Nigeria oil, or if it's copper, cobalt in DRC, the significance of resources there, the abundance of the resources there, it's just making the right environment to develop them, the right environment to attract investment. And what I do and our organizations do is form partnerships with locals, and we're very, very strong believers in working and creating the value with local companies, as opposed to, you know, some of the foreign IOCs and NOCs that come in and really are just working with government, as opposed to creating local indigenous companies. So that's really the main driver as to why we're still there and why we will be there.
Wait, that's very, you know, like walking us, you know, like through the journey that you are living. So one additional step I would like to our audience to understand is, how challenging it is, from the identification of the mineral resources to effective production. It's a people don't maybe realize how challenging it is and how complex it is to make it happen as well in a way which is like balance for the environment and that can benefit for the population. So could you just share a little bit about the complexities that as an entrepreneur, as a developer, this is actually an act almost of courage to try to develop resources and to be able to create something that will be beneficial for everyone that is involved, and by expansion for the local population.
Yes, I mean it's challenging is a light word. The difficulty is the environment was really never laid down. The framework was never really laid down, for an easy access and easy development of natural resources in Africa. So what we had to do, sure, there was IOCs. For example, I'll talk about Nigeria a lot because that was really our main area of focus, and it still is. The IOCs had been in country, developed several assets, drilled them, explored them, but only developed the larger assets, and they left a lot of these mid-sized assets unfocused, undeveloped. So there's really a lack of infrastructure. So challenging, yeah. The biggest challenge was, I believe, getting the infrastructure in place and getting a proactive community to work with you, because unfortunately there may have been some historical issues with IOCs where some of the communities maybe did not feel they were treated properly. There's environmental issues and concerns. There's a lot of flaring of gas in Nigeria. So us working with locals, independents, really changed the landscape. So a good example in Nigeria was there was a lot of militancy in the Niger Delta when a lot of the assets were controlled and operated by the IOCs. And we saw a significant change in a reduction of militancy when a lot of those assets, like the marginal field programs, are the sale by the IOCs to indigenous companies. When indigenous companies started to actively get involved, participate, there was significant amount of support from the local communities, and you saw a big reduction in the militancy, based off one factor. There were several factors. There was politically driven factors, but one of the factors I believe, and I've seen firsthand, was because of the indigenization. So you were giving more back to indigenous companies, empowering local content, more local service contractors were employed, and then more infrastructure was put on the ground. So we saw a big positive impact on that. The challenges are still there, but they're getting better. And one of the main challenges is the lack of infrastructure. If there was a way for us to work, not just with government, the government has created very good fiscal frameworks for indigenous companies to invest, lower taxes, lower royalties. But we need the international community, and mainly the international financial community, to understand the significance of the resource there and the potential the resource has, and the potential that it has for development and providing for significant reduction in things like flaring emissions. For example, Nigeria flares a lot of gas. So if we had the right type of financial framework and right type of financial investment to come in, you could take all that natural gas from the Niger Delta. You could do what they call the West African power pool. And if you had the right infrastructure, large enough transmission lines, you could literally power all of West Africa from Nigerian flared gas. So these are things that are very close to me, where we work daily to try and get the right framework. We work with the financial communities, to try and get it in place where we can we can get that investment. Unfortunately, there's political perception, there's political risk, and it creates it difficult for us to raise the type of financing that we need. So I think we need to reach out to a larger group, and that's why I'm pleased to be talking in this forum and talking to yourself, Jonathan, and your colleagues and associates, where, you know, if we can let people realize and understand the significant resource and the willingness, I would say, of the locals, right, from government to local indigenous contractors to indigenous partners, to develop these assets and to do it in a manner which is kind of taking the negative perception of kind of the oil industry, you know, reducing flared gas, reducing the emissions from flared gas, putting it into long-term sustainable projects. You know, everything is there. All the ingredients are there. It's just there's a lack of funding and a lack of willingness to fund. So I think we just need to keep working with different organizations such as yourself and try and put together the right framework that can attract that investment, because with the natural resource that's there, Africa can be a very, very significant contributor, not only to providing natural resources, oil, gas, LPG, LNG, clean fuels, also significant battery metals. You know, we're switching into mining. If you talk about, you know, the significant copper, cobalt in DRC, talk about nickel in Burundi, Tanzania. You know, there is natural resources there that can not only meet the near-term requirements, but the long-term. It's just we need more infrastructure. We need more investment in infrastructure. And we need the financial community to support us to help build that infrastructure.
Well, wait, that's absolutely, you know, like a very, very clear message. You know, it's like if we want to make things happen the best way and the most harmonious way, everyone has to be working together, and it cannot happen, you know, like it was in the past, which was, you know, like some adventurous, you know, like entrepreneur just trying, you know, like to open a path out of nowhere. Now, actually, we feel, and that we feel that the population, the local populations, really want to be part of it, and I think that through your experience as well, you saw, that's what you expressed. You saw the evolution. You saw like the talents, the opportunity in people's eyes and in people's ability. And our next speaker as well, Mrs. Waida Shah, when she will be joining from UNDP, she will outline, you know, some of the natural, you know, like nature resources and nature solutions, you know, on how we can, you know, like weather those effects. Maybe, you know, like one more comment on more your recent, you know, activities and projects. You are as well, among your different, you know, ventures, you are a founding shareholder of Declar Resources. So at the moment, what is your current agenda, Wade? What are you trying, you know, to achieve at the moment?
With Declar Resources, you know, once again, our objective with the Declar is to form partnerships with indigenous companies that have been allocated these proven undeveloped fields. So, you know, once again, there's a significant natural resource sitting there that's not developed. It was discovered by the major IOCs. Government have allocated these to indigenous companies. So what we do is come in and we provide financial and technical support to these indigenous companies. What that does is it allows a proven asset to be unlocked, which means we're doing significant development in that community. So clean water, education, healthcare, employment. So what that does is not only assisting the local company in getting their asset developed, but it's assisting the greater community in the region for development projects which have big social impacts, and also doing these projects and developing them in a way where we can maximize value and have the most reduced amount of impact on the environment. So not only will we produce oil, if there's any gas associated with the oil, which Nigeria has, we will put power generation from the onset. So we will put power generation. That power generation, typically what we do in these smaller field developments is then we will power all of our infrastructure from natural gas into natural gas-fired power plants. And then we will provide power to all the neighboring communities, power that we're generating, from that flare. So rather than flaring, like you're seeing a lot of, we will capture those flares, generate power, and then power as much of the grid as we can, in the neighborhood. So the objective is to just keep providing services, financial, technical support to indigenous companies. So we now in Declar have 3 partnerships. We have one field that is, in the early stages of development. The drilling activities will start in about 2 weeks. We've announced recently another field acquisition, and there's a 3rd field that we're negotiating, and in very, very near term, we'll be bringing that into the company as well. So really, the objective is to work with local indigenous companies, develop these assets, which have a significant impact on social development where those assets are sitting, and working and supporting local companies. Derives more taxes for local communities, federal government, and obviously a lot more employment in that region. So that's really what we like to do is get involved directly in assets that help contribute to local development, long-term sustainability, and do them in a very clean, efficient manner, where we are doing the maximum to utilize the natural gas that's associated to generate power, pull out the LPGs. LPGs can be used for cooking gas. So it's kind of that approach that we take and really like to focus on.
Well, Wade, thank you very much for sharing, this commitment of yours that continue, as you say, you will be an entrepreneur ever, in your life. So this is absolutely great. We are going, to welcome our other speaker to share some highlight, in that aspect. And then Wade, you stay with us, and we will have, some concluding words all together. So we can welcome now the next speaker, Waida Shah. Thank you, Wade.
Thank you.
Hello, Waida. It's a privilege for us to see you and welcome you. You are embedding definitely, everything which is SIGEF stand for, which is diversity, cultural empowerment, woman empowerment, and as well, a consciousness for making the world of tomorrow more sustainable. That's your commitment over more than 20 years, if not more, supporting solutions into climate, into environment, into nature. You are now one of the very, senior experts in UNDP, but your past brought you, from UN Environment, UN READ, and many other jurisdiction and organizations that you have been contributing to. You are from Africa, but as well, from other part of the world with your origins, which shows again the beautifulness of Africa as a place where humanity is capable to grow, to have its birth, but as well, its ability to include in an inclusive way. We know every eyes, of the world is looking at Africa because Africa has tremendous potential, tremendous resource, but as well, challenges, and we have a responsibility for African people and for the world to find the best way possible to make development respectful for the environment and for the local population. So it will be a privilege to listen to you on what and how, with your vision and experience, nature-based solutions can be developed, can enable to compensate the footprint, the necessary footprint that we have to do, like if we want to make some development anywhere in the world and in Africa in particular. So how can we have those bridges of respect and harmony be built? The floor is all yours, Waida. Thank you for joining us today in the 11th edition of SIGEF.
Great. Thank you so much, Jonathan, first of all, for the invitation and to be part of this exciting forum. And thank you for giving me the platform to speak about these issues. I'm going to sort of change the tact a bit, as you mentioned, to looking at I guess the larger framework in terms of development and environment in African countries. I work for UNDP with the climate and forest team, and I just like to ask Flo if you could just show the first slide, please. Thank you. All countries are trying to achieve, all of these sustainable development goals for their people, for their environment. And as you see here from this slide here, nature is so important in order to achieve these sustainable development goals. I mean, just to give you a few highlights, and I'm sure everyone knows these things, climate, forests sequester up to 1/3 of carbon emissions. Most people depend on medicinal plants from forests and from the environment. Obviously, food is where it is crucial, and the supply of food and fruit and fiber from nature. Energy in Africa, about 70% of populations in most of the countries depend on fuel wood and charcoal. And we just talked about alternatives like LPG, which of course are very important. And then, water security is really important through forest protection. So this slide shows that half of the sustainable development goals are actually going to be dependent or codependent or will be benefiting from the protection, conservation, restoration of nature. So what are these solutions? What are these nature-based solutions that we're trying to develop, engender, support, build capacity for? And that those are really around agriculture and grasslands, smart agriculture, protection of wetlands, mangroves. You maybe you have heard how important mangroves are to protect against floods, for example, and provide communities with so many benefits. And then a whole range of nature-based jobs, water security, as I mentioned, food and nutrition, which is very important, security, and then disaster risk management. So those are the kinds of nature-based solutions we're trying to support and build capacity for. Can I ask you to go to the next slide, please, Flo? So what I'd like to just focus a little bit on is the forest domain, which is what I've been working on for the last 20 years, and I'd like to provide the context of working with forests together with climate change, because as we know, climate change is such an important issue right now, and all of our efforts are trying to move towards achieving the goals that the Paris Agreement and the United Nations countries set for the planet to achieve less than 2% increase in carbon and greenhouse gas emissions. And what we're saying here is that actually nature can provide these solutions, and forests especially provide 20% of the solution to climate change. I mean, there are differentiations depending on what you read, and of course within the context of each country, but that's really sort of the important part that I'd like to emphasize. Flo, maybe we don't need the slides anymore. I don't have any more slides, so I can just speak to you. So what we've been trying to do is really support governments to address the loss and degradation of forests. And when you start to look at the drivers of those that the loss and degradation in countries, then you sort of think about agriculture, which is a key area that results in loss of forests and loss of environment, logging, mining, all of these natural resource management processes. And obviously those are key. But how are we going to address these? How are we going to address these drivers of change and land use? So what we've been doing basically is helping a number of countries in Africa, such as even Nigeria, Wade, which has work on forests, and maybe you might be familiar with the Cross River State, which is just next to the Niger Delta state, which has half of Nigeria's forests. We've Zambia, Ethiopia, Kenya, of course, the entire Congo Basin. I mean, you know that the Congo Basin forests are the second largest forests in the world. They have the largest contiguous piece of high biodiverse, high importance for communities in the Congo Basin. So, of course, with the Congo Basin countries, and then other countries that have forests, such as Ghana and all of the West African countries. So, it is in their interest to restore and use these forests sustainably, but also achieving all of the goals around food, nutrition, agriculture, energy, etc. Right? And so we. On the behest of governments, when governments say, "Look, we want to work on this," we develop strategies around how to address the drivers of deforestation. And this is where it's very interesting, because countries have been saying, African countries have been saying, look, we need to use our resources. We need to use our resources for development. And if you say that we need to, now protect them and conserve them, what are we getting back in return? And so there is an interesting mechanism within the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, which links climate finance with the protection of forests. And so what countries are doing are developing a strategy as to how they will manage their land. And if they can show that there is an increase in the level of carbon emissions that they have reduced over a period of time, they can get a financial support for that. So in essence, it's a financial mechanism to ensure that countries can achieve their policies and sustainable development objectives, but also by reducing their carbon emissions in the land sector. So we've been working on this for now 15 years, and countries have developed strategies. Most of the countries that I mentioned, Nigeria, Ghana, the Congo Basin countries, DRC, Congo Brazza, Kenya, Ethiopia, Zambia, have all developed strategies, and they've also developed capacity to monitor and report and verify, what's going on the landscape, how much forest they have, how much carbon stocks they have. They've set these reference levels that enable a measurement to be made as to how much carbon has been reduced in the long term, so that this climate finance can be accessed. And of course, there's monitoring systems that have been set up in countries. So we've been able to access financing to support countries to do this. Okay, but so what happens? These countries have these strategies in place. A lot of the complaints have been, okay, look, we've done all the work. Countries have done the work to develop these strategies, but we still haven't accessed the financing to be able to implement these strategies. So we've been working a lot more on that now, and I can go into some of these solutions in terms of accessing finance, which is key for countries to be able to actually implement all the good work that they have set in place. I can just go on to maybe address some of the issues that it's great to have a strategy, but then how do you sort of address some of these integrated and more political institutional issues? Would you like me to go ahead with that?
Yes, Wade, absolutely. And as well, I think what you are pointing, is very key. Because the financial aspect is going to be, the cornerstone, you know, like for execution to be applied on the ground? And would you be able as well to add your perception and what might be as well sought for the corporation, the private sector? Because we know there is the government aspect, but the job is mostly done most of the time, you know, by the entrepreneurs and the private sectors. And what can be the incentives for them? What can be as well, you know, like the measures or your thoughts that can be, you know, like for them to think, I can make good impact. But not only that, this is going to be beneficial not just for the values of my company, my teams, my employees, my philosophy, but as well for my bottom line. So if we are capable, you know, like to stress that and to have incentive for the private sector, which is all what is the SDG about, which is, you know, like the PPP, you know, like a public-private partnership framework we want to establish, then we really have, you know, like a room for motivating, you know, like all stakeholders. So please, Waida, go ahead.
Great, thank you. No, you're absolutely right, Jonathan. That is going to be key. I mean, without private sector financing, it's going to be way more difficult or perhaps impossible to achieve many of these goals. And this is the interesting part and the exciting part, engaging with private sector. And I think the issues that we confront are how to do that in a way that is going to address the fundamental issues that we have to deal with. And if I may, I'll just sort of speak a little bit as to what those issues are, and then perhaps describe to you one or two of these exciting public-private partnerships that are coming online. When countries are addressing fundamental issues such as poverty and climate change and the natural resources that people rely on, we really need to look at the underlying factors. And there's some of those are relating to market failures and governance failures, obviously. There's really important issues around political commitment and the capacities within institutions in government and at the community level. There needs to be clear policy incentives, right, to make a certain change and to make these adjustments, and that follows through with institutional reform and shifting these resource flows from unsustainable investments to ones that will really result in sometimes I don't like to use that phrase win-win, but a win-win for people and the environment and the planet. And that's what we really need to strive for. Most importantly, we need these multi-stakeholder partnerships. We have to work with people and on the ground. And this is why I love doing what I'm doing, because we work with communities who say, we know what we want to do with our resources, and this is how we'd like to manage them in order to be sustainable. But you need to create this enabling environment. And even for the private sector, they require an enabling environment to be able to engage effectively at these levels. And then, of course, the knowledge and needs of indigenous peoples, where this applies, the communities, the role of women, and really ensuring, for example, that we have these systems in place which allow women to be able to engage and have these safeguards in place so that people are not misrepresented, that there aren't negative effects. We need to support this sort of integrated planning, and that's really difficult to do, but that's really, really important. And I'd like to sort of maybe emphasize this, that it's really important to have these consultative and multi-stakeholder processes. Even though things take time, it is really important to have everyone on board. For example, we have just been able to access financing from the Green Climate Fund, which finances climate change mitigation as well as adaptation processes and programs in countries across the world. And we've been able to access financing in Ghana for the northern landscapes, which are dominated by the shea tree. I'm not sure if people know the share tree, or karité in French. It's an amazing tree that provides many uses for local people. It's basically the women are in charge of that value chain for karité, and it's also used in cosmetics and in the chocolate industry. It's a really important commodity, but the trees are being are being deforested there, and there is need for, and so we've been able to access financing to restore this landscape, the share landscape. But the beauty of it is that it's a commodity, it's a value chain. So the women are in charge of this at the local level, but they are linked to the private sector companies that use share. And so we're trying to create an entire value chain that allows more benefits for the women, that allows restoration of these share trees so that they continue to harvest karité from the landscape and benefit monetarily, as well as all of the other uses they have within their communities. And then the private sector companies that are involved in this program are also really key. They are supporting the women's cooperatives. We're looking at direct marketing and direct pricing possibilities, and all these things that will allow this value chain to be sustainable but beneficial, but also have these very important private sector partnerships. And just developing a program like that takes time, right? You need to have communities engaged and really able to have their voice very clearly articulated, and to have the safeguards in place. So that took us 2-3 years just to develop, but now we have this financing, so that's a really exciting thing that we want to sort of follow through. I'll give you just one more example if I have the time.
Yes, we can. Yes.
Thank you. You may have heard of sort of increasing requirements by countries as well as private sector companies to reduce their footprint, to reduce their ecological footprint, and to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions. And more this is going to be part of regulation, and so companies will actually need to also comply. But many companies are saying we will do this voluntarily. We want to reduce our carbon emissions. And so one of the sort of recent one of the recent platforms that have emerged is a coalition of companies and institutions called Emergent. And basically they're coming together, and they are providing the finance to countries as well as jurisdictions sort of to buy carbon, but to do that in a way that is really taken into account the environmental integrity, so that you're not greenwashing and just selling hot air, to abide by safeguards. And so that is really key, because it's big companies who have come together and say, we will provide this financing, but we need to be sure that the carbon emissions that we are buying are not harming people, are really resulting in environmental benefits for people and for the planet. And so this is there. Finally, after all this time, and this is something that we've been really grappling with, is to have this financing and this investment to be directed in this manner towards more sustainable outcomes.
Guaida was very deep and very profound, to listen to you. We are very hopeful and appreciated, in the many, thousands of hours and dedication, to as you say, to build those programs, to build those roads for building the solutions of tomorrow. We measure how challenging it is, and we are thanking you and your team and all the ones that are collaborating with you at multi-stakeholder level, to favor that path. With your permission, I will ask, our team to bring Wade back with us, and so we can, go into the final step of this very, passionate session. So, both of you are sharing a common love for Africa. and for its diversity and its people. And Waida, you are building the solutions that Wade can leverage in his, different entrepreneurship, initiatives to make, even more harmonious, weathering of the footprint we can have when we are supporting economic development in Africa regarding, natural resources. So my first question is very concretely, Waida, if you had a magic wand and you could, tell us, programs we could look and Wade could look with his team to have, to promote that with other entrepreneurs and himself, what would be those initiatives and programs?
Thank you very much, Jonathan. That's a great question. I believe that if I had this wand, I would look at the possibilities of seeing where we could sort of take the momentum that Wade described. I mean, I think it's very interesting what you were speaking about, Wade, in terms of capturing the gas flares, right? So that energy isn't dissipated and actually used and used for communities. I would like to hope that we can move away from fossil fuels and move to alternatives such as solar and other energy sources that would be available to communities. But obviously that's a transition, right? It cannot happen overnight, and we need the investment. So in for example, in the programs that you're working on and the investments that you're creating and working with people on the ground, have that transition process to a zero carbon emission sort of scenario, and move towards that process of transition. It requires the research, it requires the technology, it requires accessing political platforms that will support that process. So it's complex, and I would think that would be a really great thing that can be done, because we need to move in that direction, I think.
Yeah.
Wait, what your feedback on that? What would be your insight on that?
Yeah, look, I think there's a few questions that kind of popped to my mind in listening to Waida's talk. So the first thing I would say is totally agree that we need to transition from fossil fuel, but my perception of that is that we do have fossil fuels still. Fossil fuels are going to be required for the midterm, but if we can start getting the mindset to transition out of them. But what we want to do is for example, like I mentioned, there's a lot of flared gas. If we can have an impact by just not flaring that gas, if we can immediately go to gas capturing, where we have LPGs. LPGs is used for cooking gas. Then we can take the lean gas, put it into power plants to power the communities, help develop communities, help for a better social environment for the communities. That's the first step. I think the first step is taking what we have now that is kind of something that can add value, as opposed to something that's being detrimental to the environment. So let's do that as the first step. And I think if we do that, it generates income and it generates perception then to get us into that second phase, which is transitioning into the fossil fuels. Now, the question I would have, Waida, is, and I'd love to speak, maybe Jonathan, myself, and you could have like a Zoom call, offline this week, is because we are investing in development programs, something that just kind of comes to my mind is for us to help, maybe become on a more carbon neutral, while we're in that transition program, is looking at investing in some of your forestry projects, because then that's obviously a carbon offset for it. So, I'd be very interested to look at what you believe would be good investment opportunities, into reforestation or protecting existing forests, because that's something that I think that would be very interesting for us to do as a as kind of an oil and gas producer or a natural resource mining entity, maybe we put some of our profits back into some of your initiatives. And we could then look at, it's an innovative way to finance too, because what we could do is we could, in essence, in addition to just traditionally financing what we do on our, let's say, oil and mining projects, we then could have a type of a streaming program, because we do that maybe in the mining sector where we do streaming investments. So we get a stream of copper or a stream of cobalt. We could look at some carbon streaming investments where we would be able to raise funding for oil and gas and mining developments, but then also raise additional funding to invest in your project because we're getting the carbon offsets. And that's just another way for us then to then raise money. So the investors could come in and say, look, we're not just investing in kind of a natural resource, we're investing in a carbon streaming structure. Yes, there's money going into the oil and gas and mining ventures, but it's also going into your forest project. So I'd love to talk maybe later this week, because I'm just thinking creatively, there's a way for us to work together.
Yeah, I think this is like the way we like to see things. We like to see things through SIGEF as a platform to connect stakeholders and be able like to build those partnerships that will bring us one step further. And I think definitely Waida and Wade, after this 11th edition of SIGEF, we will facilitate the communication and coordination, and we hope we will be able to build new case that will be able to inspire other stakeholders and being applied concretely at the benefit of the population. What I want as well to add is SDG number 1, which is the founding SDG, is no poverty. That's what we owe to all citizens of the planet. No poverty, because no poverty means access to education, access to health, access to dignity, access to hope, and access to dreams, and be able as well, when you have that, you are capable to think a world more sustainable. That's very important to understand. We owe our citizens economic and social and inclusive development in every jurisdiction. This is essential. Yeah. And when we are building those roads of harmonious development, then we are absolutely eager and entitled to think how we can make sure those roads are sustainable. And I think that's the objectives here. So that's what I think is really passionate. Maybe just a last word from each one of you. If you had some thoughts to share with citizens of the world listening to us today, in a 1 or 2 minute statement, what will be your statement? What will be your message to the world? I would like to start with Waida, that has enlightened us, today. Waida, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your wisdom and concrete solutions. So what is your message, Waida, to the world?
Thank you very much, Jonathan. If I may take the liberty, perhaps just to say one thing with regards to Wade's sort of response on coming together, and I really sort of welcome that. But one thing that I really like to emphasize, well, 2 things, and one you already did, Jonathan, about sort of the priority to address poverty. That is key, and that is the priority. You're absolutely right. But and also within that sort of framework of trying to address poverty, Wade mentioned forest projects. These are not forest projects. This is really a national level process, coming together in some kind of an integrated planning that allows a country to.
You are on mute, Waida. Yes, you can unmute yourself. Perfect.
Excuse me. Yeah. Yes. I was saying that it's really a process. At the national level, at the jurisdictional level, at the community level, to address poverty, but also to address, for example, a country's nationally determined contribution, which are the targets for greenhouse gas emissions that countries say that they will reduce, so that in total we can all have this reduction of carbon dioxide and carbon. So it's really a national level process, and so this is really the starting point. And you said, what would be my message? Well, this is the key thing. If we are going to achieve the transition and the objectives of the Sustainable Development Goals, we need to really have these scales, the scaling up. We need to do things at the national level, obviously starting from a bottom-up approach, but the effects cannot be sort of one project here or one thing there. We need to bring those together, scale up the solutions, and I really believe that we can get there. And I really believe that if we can each take, even in our own sort of ways of living, changes that will allow those larger changes to be made, I think we need the courage and the volition to be able to do that. So I would. I'm trying to do it. I'm trying my best to to change my behaviors, my way of consumption, but it's tough, right? But I think hopefully we will get there if we all have that real willingness to do so. Thank you.
Thank
You
you,
very
Wade.
much.
Thank you very much. Wade, what will be your message for the world?
Well, I think relating to natural resource developments, I think what we need to do is just look beyond kind of what we're doing now as far as CSRs are concerned, and look more of kind of the social impact and the impact on environment, and how we can change as natural resource development companies to improve. I think rather than kind of having some negative labeling for what we do, we can turn that into a positive, and we can do that by, obviously your number one SG, more and more development in emerging markets. There's significant natural resource, so let's develop, create employment, reduce poverty. But then also take what we have now, use the tools we have as far as the natural resource tools, and make them positive. So reduce the flares, which is a positive, because then we're generating clean energy. On the mining sector, we can create significant employment, poverty reduction in the Congo by mining in a sustainable manner the copper and the cobalt. Unfortunately, there's a lot of natural resource, copper, cobalt resource there, but there are some restrictions. Some of the main end users of those electric car batteries won't buy any of the cobalt from Congo. So I think we need to, do things on the ground proactively with the government to help industry realize that we do have developments being done in a sustainable way, in a very transparent way. So there's a lot of things we can do, with what we have now. And I think that's just the biggest message is, for all the natural resource entities, governments, let's take advantage of what we have. Yes, it's always good to have the vision for fossil fuel reduction, but let's work with what we have now and transform it into something that ticks all the boxes and goes beyond, the first steps of social development.
Wade, Wahida, thank you so much for joining us today. I think the plenary was very fruitful in terms of bringing more knowledge, more insight on the challenges, the journey of developing, building, making things as an entrepreneur, and as well from the angle of international organization thinking how we can make things more sustainable, how we can build solutions, how we can advise and recommend governments with the paths that will be beneficial for their population and for the world as a whole. So thank you so much for joining us. And to our viewers now, next session will happen, from 2 p.m. CET Geneva time for the session dedicated to women empowerment. And Wade, I look forward to the continuation of our exchange. And Wade, thank you so much for joining us today and being, like a philanthropist and supporter of this 11th edition as well.
Thank you.
All the best to you all. And let's continue to think and do the world of tomorrow and shape better times to come. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.